ECOWAS, the Economic Community of West African States, has served as France's puppet for many years. Even though ECOWAS was created to promote economic cooperation among West African nations, there was a murky, hidden aim. It was done to support France and other Western nations in asserting their dominance and defending their interests in Africa. Because of this, the Ecowas vowed to invade Niger following the coup and urged the country to restore the civilian government. However, the Ecowas had vanished when France was exploiting Niger, forcing it to sell uranium at the lowest prices and requesting that it deposit its deposits in French banks. Why was ECOWAS silent when France was taking advantage of African nations? All of the answers, however, may be found in what ECOWAS actually is and aims to do. Dr. Arikana Chihombori Kwao, a former African Union ambassador, has revealed how France is betraying Africa and millions of Africans by using ECOWAS as a puppet. What did she say, though? Learn more about how ECOWAS serves France rather than the African continent. ECOWAS was very alarmed and on the verge of a possible military intervention when the military junta took over in Niger. It was unexpected that an African organization would threaten to invade another African nation. How could Niger be threatened by an African group whose only goal was economic cooperation? Many people in Africa and the West believed that perhaps ECOWAS is attempting to find a solution because it does not want the issue to get worse. However, this prospective action was not motivated by genuine concern for the Nigerian people. It was done to protect French interests in Niger and guarantee that French influence would endure there no matter what. France is controlling Niger with the help of the ECOWAS and, if necessary, launching a military incursion. France must utilize ECOWAS as a tool because it is unable to intervene directly. You should be aware that ECOWAS is a confederation of 15 nations in Africa, with an economic partnership aimed at promoting development. This goal was never attained, though. Instead, ECOWAS is currently attempting to transform into an openly hireable military organization that will do whatever the West desires in Africa. It has been a colonial strategy to outsource all atrocities to one of the parties or divisions within the nation-states, rather than committing them directly. There are always resentful factions in a country or region that can be hired. Native organizations aided European colonial forces in acquiring land in India because of this. That is what ECOWAS is now doing. By utilizing the name of ECOWAS, it is enabling the former colonial power France to act however it pleases. Because this was never on the agenda, ECOWAS never paid attention to the issues facing Niger or any of its other members. You should be aware that Niger has faced ongoing difficulties throughout its history. Although being a part of ECOWAS, the group had never felt the need to intervene. In Niger, there were concerns over uranium pricing. Only 20% of the Nigerian people has access to electricity, leaving the bulk or 80% in the dark, despite the country providing about 20% of France's power. This difference puzzled me. Furthermore, it seemed questionable why Niger decided to keep French as its official language, despite just a small fraction of the people speaking it, and to continue depositing its money in the French central bank. Why did ECOWAS not step in to help Niger achieve full independence and remove all ties to the West? There has never been a moment when African nations needed ECOWAS to speak. Only the president of ECOWAS, who is also the president of Nigeria, can. The ECOWAS and the rest of the world remained mute as drone bases were set up in Niger, as if Niger had no vote in who may conduct military operations on its soil. ECOWAS, however, made an abrupt effort to assert influence when Niger expressed a desire for independence, acting like a toothless bulldog seeking to frighten. This sudden impetus seemed to originate in France. The most reasonable explanation, it seemed, was that France sought to use ECOWAS's clout to avoid facing international criticism for acting in Niger to defend its interests. France has formally stated that it will assist ECOWAS if it intervenes in Niger because of this. It should be clear that aiding France's military expansion constitutes betraying that person or organization. Africans are well aware that while France can be anything, it is not Africa's buddy. So, why is the eco-conscious implementing French directives as its own rules? The only alternative left to Niger is to launch a coup because France was stationing troops there. By doing this, France effectively forced Niger to deposit half of its reserves with the French government and mandated that only it could train the country's military. A coup d'état was the only option since, if Niger's military had led it, it would have meant eternal servitude. Dr. Arikana brought to light all of the concerns about what the Ecowas members had done in relation to the decades-long exploitations taking place in the 14 former French colonies, which have had a significant negative impact on the people living in these countries. She claimed that, although Ecowas has successfully avoided addressing these important problems, it is imperative that they do so and put forth workable solutions. She emphasized that millions of children are starving to death, countless people go to bed hungry, many African young struggle with unemployment, and countless mothers lose their lives giving birth. These are serious issues that need to be addressed right away during this important conversation. She asserted that the Ecowas is more concerned in becoming a lapdog for France than in tackling these pressing issues. You need to be somewhat aware of the context in order to comprehend what she really means and what Ecowas is doing. President Mohamed Bazoum was ousted by the military junta in July, which caused joy across Niger. Is it as a result of the prolonged struggle with extreme poverty in the nation? Despite its abundance in uranium resources and its potential for growth due to its coastline, there is significant food poverty and hunger. Nevertheless, despite numerous democratic elections bringing virtually little change, poverty, bloodshed, and instability continue to haunt Niger. Why do 10 million people in Niger live in abject poverty if Mohamed Bazoum is doing everything right and working for the country's citizens? Why did the people of Niger rejoice when he was overthrown if he was so beloved? Despite what it could see, France felt there was still hope. It then made the decision to employ its time-honored strategy to preserve the robust democracy in Niger. Perhaps the West has to realize that it is not their problem to solve whenever a cosmetic democracy is threatened anywhere in the world. You should be aware that the president of Guinea had already brought up the main issue prior to the military junta's activities. It has been unsuccessful for France to impose a democracy on its former colonies. Every nation should be able to customize its democratic system to suit its particular circumstances and beliefs. Therefore, the military junta in Niger expressed dissatisfaction with the current situation and chose a new strategy, hoping to construct a type of government more suited to Niger's unique circumstances. France and the West, however, seem unable to comprehend that. A leader is considered illegitimate in the West if he takes office without a vote. What about Adolf Hitler, who became office following the elections? Can the West claim that his age was democratic while yet fully endorsing Hitler's actions? The solution is available right now, I suppose, due to the fact that everything depends on what the authority does for its own citizens. France's vehement defense of former President Mohamed Bazoum raised questions about its extensive engagement in Niger's political system. Algeria refused to take part in any action that may be met with international censure and turned down France's request to utilize its airspace for a military operation in Niger. After the military junta's activities, Ecowas, which had hitherto been uninvolved, made an effort to step in. But when it finally tried to effect something, it ran into opposition. In a show of unity against the ongoing control of their former colonial powers, Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso joined forces to make it plain that an attack on one would be seen as an attack on all. Dr. Arikana made it abundantly obvious that the Ecowas and its members support those who enslave Africa. Both the African people and history will not forget their names. She stated that the security pact between Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso is sending a strong statement that African countries are now united. The Ecowas leaders, however, do not even have the backing of their own nations. It's because they are taking action to help African immigrants. How therefore can the African people embrace something like this, knowing full well that it will affect their African brothers in Nigeria? People were protesting, and Nigerians warned their president, who was also the Ecowas chair, not to dare send Nigerian military soldiers to die in Nigeria for an unrelated cause. They maintained that it belonged to France. Let France engage in battle. Why put innocent Nigerian soldiers' lives in danger to further a foreign goal? Please remember to subscribe, like, and share the video. For more videos about Black culture, history, civilization, and identity, subscribe to our channel. Let's move on now. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, for instance, has a number of urgent domestic concerns to handle despite siding with France and advocating for war in Nigeria. People are leaving the country, unemployment rates are at record highs, and fuel prices are at all-time highs. Despite his recent political success, there is still no solution to police brutality. Nigeria's current output of roughly 1.1 million barrels is falling short of its OPEC production goals, falling short of the anticipated 1.7 million barrels. The president of Nigeria, however, wants to invade Niger rather than find a solution to these issues. That's because France, his master, gave him the command to do so. The Nigerian president might focus his attention on a number of important topics. If ECOWAS had truly cared for Niger, they would have expressed their support for it by rejecting the long history of persecution the nation has endured. According to Dr. Arikana, if ECOWAS had honestly cared about the welfare of Niger, they would have actively sought a resolution, negotiating a way to get things back to normal in the nation. Instead of concentrating on securing free and democratic elections, lessening French dominance, and creating new trade alliances, they ought to have done so. Instead, they began to consider possible military action, which would appear to be to France's advantage. They didn't seem as concerned with the well-being of the Nigerians as they did with the advantages France may provide. It is disgraceful that they are effectively betraying their fellow Africans. Dr. Arikana stated that during ECOWAS meetings, she pushed those present to take a broader view, taking into account the continued exploitation taking place in the former French colonies, which has persisted for decades without any significant action from ECOWAS. The population of these nations suffer greatly and go hungry as a result of these exploitations. While millions of African women die giving birth, millions of African youth struggle with unemployment. These topics must also be at the forefront of the conversation. We must look at the situation globally if the leaders' interests truly lie in the welfare of Africans. We cannot remain silent about the crimes committed in Africa, according to Dr. Arikana. The ongoing exploitation by France is nothing short of a coup. The underlying causes and sources of these ongoing political and economic exploitations across the 14 former French colonies must be addressed. It's important to tackle the larger context and the root causes of the current problems, rather than focusing only on the situation in Niger. Avoiding this in-depth analysis serves no useful purpose. Military involvement in Niger shouldn't even be considered, according to Dr. Arikana. She advised us to discover better solutions to our problems. African leaders must meet and have an open conversation about what is ultimately best for the people of Niger, the former French colonies, and ultimately all African nations. Now is the time for genuine unity. Among African leaders, a sense of purpose. She advised, saying, "Enough is enough at this point. People have spoken, and now it's time to pay attention to them." ECOWAS is now known to be a French puppet organization, created to legitimize French domination in Africa. Instead of actively trying to better the lives of Africans, the economic community of West African governments mostly serves as a conduit for Western interests. The fact that ECOWAS has not successfully challenged the pervasive influence of former colonial powers in the area is a major cause for concern. Instead, it helped Western powers keep their hold over the region's politics and economy by maintaining the status quo of neocolonialism. It is because ECOWAS actions and policies seem to put the needs of outside forces ahead of the long-term welfare of the African people. Critics frequently point to particular instances where ECOWAS appeared to favor Western nations' interests over the needs and preferences of the local communities. Examples include cases where the organization has remained inactive or failed to take significant action against political interference, economic exploitation, or human rights violations carried out by foreign actors. Many have questioned the commitment of ECOWAS to defending the interests and sovereignty of its member states as a result of this perceived passivity. Concerns have also been expressed regarding the Western powers' impact on the trade relations and economic policies of ECOWAS member nations. Some commercial agreements and economic partnerships negotiated by ECOWAS, according to skeptics, may not always be in the best interests of the area, and may even result in the overexploitation of regional resources, foreign actors' access to resources and markets. Critical socioeconomic problems in the area, such as poverty, unemployment, and political instability, were never addressed by ECOWAS. Suspicions that the organization's actions are motivated by outside interests rather than a real dedication to increasing the well-being of the African population have grown as a result of its apparent failure to put into practice successful plans for sustainable development and social advancement. The claim that ECOWAS serves as a tool for the West is frequently based on ECOWAS's perceived autonomy deficit, inability to address structural issues, and apparent alignment with the objectives of foreign powers. These reservations cast doubt on the organization's sincere commitment to the development and prosperity of the African continent. You ought to be aware that not all nations and ecosystems serve as tools for France. Instead, France has allies who have taken varying oaths of loyalty. Bola Ahmed Tinubu, the president of Nigeria, is at the top of the list of those individuals. He was made president of Nigeria, in addition to being more than just France's lapdog and covert buddy, but also the ECOWAS president. He is the one pressuring ECOWAS to talk about a military involvement in Niger, while ignoring other pressing matters. Due to his continued alignment with Western interests over the welfare of Africans, he is nothing more than an instrument of the West. Critics routinely draw attention to occasions where Tinubu appeared to overlook important domestic issues in Nigeria. Allegations of unchecked corruption, rising unemployment rates, inadequate infrastructure, and enduring societal inequities are a few of the problems affecting Nigerians today. His commitment to furthering the welfare of the Nigerian people has been questioned in light of his reluctance to address these urgent issues and seeming attention on Western interests. Consider the absurdity of the Nigerian president asking the legislature to authorize military intervention in Niger. He never fulfilled this request, despite it being for the good of the Nigerian people. Tinubu already demonstrated his preferences by enacting regional policies that favored the West, particularly those that affected West Africa, raising doubts about his dedication to promoting regional autonomy and sovereignty. The ECOWAS was already ineffectual in addressing France's continued exploitation of African countries, thereby maintaining a colonial framework under the pretext of encouraging regional cooperation. However, all optimism for Africa's independence was dashed on that day when Tinubu was elected president of the ECOWAS. Nobody is unaware of ECOWAS's continual disregard for France's ongoing economic exploitation of its member nations, allowing the former colonial power to control banking systems, manipulate trade agreements, and extract resources at much lower rates than what is considered to be normal on the world market. The failure of ECOWAS to take a strong stand against France's exploitative behavior in West Africa is one important aspect of this argument. This includes the unfair trade agreements that allow France to purchase African resources, like gold and other priceless commodities, at considerably reduced costs. In addition, the ECOWAS has failed to address the problem of French control over the financial systems of some of its members, where a sizable amount of their reserves are deposited in French banks, giving France an unfair edge in determining their economic policies. The ECOWAS has not been able to condemn France's behavior, despite being fully aware of its exploitative practices. casting doubt on its dedication to defending the economic well-being and sovereignty of its member states. This perceived inactivity has been seen as tacit cooperation that upholds the neo-colonial links between France and its former colonies and allows the West to keep its economic hegemony and influence in the area. By educating the Nigerian military and aiding Bola Ahmed Tinubu's ascent, France has influenced Nigeria to exert control over Ecowas. As a result, France has been able to exercise its authority since the Nigerian leader will continue in office for as long as France desires. How do you feel? Does Ecowas want France to benefit from benefits for Africans? Is it accurate to say that France has always used Ecowas as a tool to subtly rule Africa? Please share your opinions on whether Africans should trust Ecowas or place it on par with France. Would you like to see more movies like this one? If so, click the bell icon next to our channel and subscribe. We have made the decision to present videos on a topic that is rarely discussed: Black culture, civilization, history, and proof of how admirable Blacks have been. Stay tuned until the next video, and thanks for viewing.